Our next story from Grimm Fairy Tales is The Fisherman and His Wife. Once upon a time there was a fisherman and his wife who lived together in a shack that was so filthy it may as well have been a piss pot. Every day the fisherman went out to fish, and he fished and he fished. One day he sat there looking down into the clear water, and he sat and he sat, and his line went all the way down to the bottom of the sea. And when he pulled it out, there was a great big flounder fish on the hook. The flounder said, "Now look, fisherman, what about letting me live, eh? I'm no ordinary flounder, I'm an enchanted prince. What good would it do to kill me? I wouldn't taste nice at all. Put me back in the water, now there's a good fellow." "Fair enough," said the fisherman. "Say no more. The word of a talking fish is good enough for me." And he put the flounder back in the water, and it swam to the bottom, leaving a long trail of blood behind it. Then the fisherman went back to his wife in their filthy shack. "Did you catch anything today?" she said. "Oh yes," he said, "I caught a flounder fish, and it was a big un. But he told me he was an enchanted prince, so I let him go." "Typical," said his wife. "Why didn't you ask him for something?" "I don't know," said the fisherman. "What should I have asked for?" "Those enchanted princes can do anything," said his wife, and looked at the shack. "It stinks, the rain comes in, the shells keep falling off the wall. It's a terrible place to live. Go back, call that flounder up, and tell him we want a nice cottage, all clean and neat. Go on then." The fisherman didn't really like doing that, but on the other hand he knew what would happen if he didn't do what his wife wanted, so he went back to the seashore. When he got there, the water wasn't clear anymore, but dark green and murky yellow. He stood on the shore and said, "Flounder, flounder in the sea, listen up and come to me. My wife, the lovely Isabel, has sent me down here to do her will." The flounder came up and said, "Well, what does she want?" "Oh, there you are. Well, it's not my idea, you understand. But what she says is that I should have asked you to grant a wish, and she told me what to wish for. She says she's tired of living in a shack like a piss-pot and wants to live in a cottage." "Go home," said the flounder. "She's got her wish already." The fisherman went home, and there was his wife, standing in front of a neat little cottage. "There," she said, "isn't that better?" There was a little garden at the front, a pretty little parlour, and a bedroom with a proper feather bed, and a kitchen and a pantry. All the rooms were furnished beautifully, and the tin bowls and copper saucepans were polished so bright they sparkled. Outside at the back there was a little yard and a pond with chickens and ducks, and a garden with vegetables and fruit trees. "Well, what did I tell you?" said the wife. "Oh, yes," said the fisherman. "This is very nice, we can live here all right." "We'll see," said the wife. Then they had supper and went to bed, and everything was fine for a week or two. Then his wife said, "Listen to me, this cottage is too small. I can barely turn around in the kitchen, and as for the garden, half a dozen steps and you've reached the other side. It's not good enough. That flounder could have given us a bigger place if he wanted to. It's all the same to him. I want to live in a palace, all made of marble. Go back and ask him for a palace." "Oh, wife," said the man, "this is good enough for us. We don't want a palace. What would we do in a palace?" "Plenty of things," said the wife. "You're a defeatist, that's what you are. Go on then, go and ask for a palace." "Oh dear, I don't know. He's just given us a cottage. I don't really want to bother him again. He might get angry with me. Don't be so feeble. He can do it. He won't mind. Go on. The fisherman felt bad about it. He didn't want to go at all. It's not right, he said to himself, but he went anyway. When he got to the shore, the water had changed colour again. Now it was dark blue, purple and grey. He stood at the water's edge and said, Flounder, flounder in the sea, listen up and come to me. My wife, the gracious Isabel, has sent me here to do her will. What does she want this time? Said the flounder. Well, you see, she says the cottage is a bit small. She'd like to live in a palace. Go home, she's standing in front of the door. The fisherman set off home, and when he arrived there was no cottage any more, but a great palace all made of marble. His wife was standing at the top of the steps about to open the door. Come on, don't drag your feet, come and have a look. He went in with her. The first room was a great hall with black and white stone floor. There were large doors in every wall, and beside each door was a servant who bowed and flung it open. They could see rooms in every direction, and all the walls were painted white with beautiful tapestry. The tables and chairs in every room were made of pure gold, and a crystal chandelier hung from every ceiling with 1,000 diamonds twinkling in each one. The carpets were so deep the fisherman and his wife found their feet sinking to their ankles. In the dining room there was a feast so enormous that the tables had to be reinforced with oak struts to stop them collapsing. Outside the palace there was a large courtyard covered in pure white gravel, each stone individually polished, and there stood a row of scarlet carriages of every size, with white horses to pull each one. The fisherman and his wife came out. All the horses bowed their heads and dropped a curtsy. Beyond the courtyard was a garden of indescribable loveliness, with flowers whose scent perfumed the air for miles around, and fruit trees laden with apples, pears, oranges and lemons. And beyond the garden was a park half a mile long at least, with elk and deer and hares and every decorative wild beast. Isn't this nice? Said the wife. Oh, yes, said the fisherman. There's plenty good enough for me. We can live here and want for nothing. Well, we'll see, said the wife. Let's sleep on it and see how we feel in the morning. The next morning the wife woke up first. The sun was just rising. As she sat up in bed, she could see the garden and the parkland and the mountains beyond. Her husband was snoring happily beside her. But she poked him in the ribs and said, Husband, get up. Come on, I want to look out of the window. He yawned and stretched and dragged himself to the window. What is it? He said. Well, we have a garden, that's all very well. We have a parkland that's very fine and large. But look beyond, mountains. I want to be king, so we can have the mountains as well. Oh, wife, said the fisherman, I don't want to be king. Why would we want to be king? We haven't even seen all the rooms of this palace yet. That's your trouble, she told him. No ambition. Even if you don't want to be king, I want to be king. Oh, wife, I can't ask him that. He's been so generous already. I can't tell him you want to be king. Yes, yes, you can. Be off with you. Oh, sighed the fisherman. Off he went, heavy-hearted. The fish won't like it, he thought, and he went anyway. When he got to the shore, the water was dark grey. The waves were heaving themselves up from the depths with a horrible smell. The fisherman said, Flounder, flounder in the sea, listen up and come to me. My wife, the gentle Isabel, has sent me here to do her will. Well, said the flounder, I'm sorry, but she wants to be king. Go home, she's king already. So back he went. When he arrived at the palace, it had become twice as large as before. A tall tower stood over the entrance, with a scarlet flag flying from the top, sentries guarding the doors. The fishermen cautiously walked up to it, and they saluted him with a crush of rifles. He nearly jumped out of his shoes. The drummers beat their drums, the trumpeters blew their fanfare, and the great doors flew open. He tiptoed inside, and he found everything had been gilded, and it was twice as big as before. Every cushion was covered in crimson velvet with gold embroidery. Golden tassels hung on everything that had a handle. Every wall was hung with gold-framed portraits of the fisherman and his wife, dressed as Roman emperors or kings or queens and goddesses, and all the clocks chimed in welcome as he passed. A huge pair of doors flew open, and there was a whole court waiting to receive him. A major domo bellowed, His Majesty the Fisherman. He went in, and hundreds of lords and ladies bowed low and parted to let him walk up to the throne. And sitting on the throne there was his wife, wearing a robe of silk all covered in pearls and sapphires and emeralds. She had a golden crown on her head, and she was holding a scepter made of gold and studded with rubies, each at least the size of the fisherman's big toe. On either side of the throne stood a line of ladies in waiting, each one a head shorter than the next, who all curtsied as he approached. Well, wife, said the fisherman, are you king now? Yes, I am king now, she said. I'm glad to hear it. That's very nice. Now we don't have to do any more wishing. She said, tapping her finger on the arm of the throne. I'm not sure about that. I've been king so long I'm getting bored. Go back to the flounder and tell him I want to be emperor. Oh, wife, think about it. He can't make you emperor. There's already an emperor, and there can only be one at a time. Don't you dare speak to me like that. I'm the king. Don't you forget. You do as you're told. Go and talk to that flounder. If he can make me king, he can make me emperor. It's all the same. Go on, go. So off he went, but he was very uneasy. This isn't going to end well, he thought. The flounder will get fed up with all this wishing. When he arrived at the seashore, the water was black and dense and boiling up from the depths. A strong wind whipped the waves into foam, and the fisherman stood there and said, Flounder, flounder in the sea, listen up and come to me. My wife, the dainty Isabel, has sent me here to do her will. Well, tell me, said the flounder. She wants to be emperor. Go home. She's emperor already. So he went home again, and this time he found the palace was higher than before, with turrets at every corner, a row of cannons in front of it, an entire regiment of soldiers marching up and down in scarlet uniforms. As soon as they saw him, they stood to attention and saluted. The cannons fired a volley that made his ears ache. The gate flew open and in he went, and only to discover that the entire inside of the building had been gilded. Alabaster statues of himself and his wife in heroic postures along the walls. Everywhere he went, dukes and princes hastened to open the doors and bow low. In the throne room he found his wife sitting on a throne, one made of one piece of solid gold 2 miles high, and he could only see her because she was wearing a crown that was 3 yards high and 2 yards across, and that was solid gold as well, set with emeralds. In one hand she held the scepter, and in the other the imperial orb. 2 rows of soldiers formed her personal guard, each one smaller than the next, ranging from giants as tall as the throne 2 little men no bigger than my finger, all bristling with weapons. Princes, dukes, counts and earls, all barons, all waited in attendance. The fisherman went to the foot of the throne and called her, "Wife, are you emperor now? What does it look like? Very impressive. I expect you'll stop wishing at last." "That's you all over. Poverty of aspiration. This isn't good enough, I tell you. Let me tell you." "Oh, wife, not again." "Go back to that flounder, tell him I want to be Pope." "But you can't be Pope. There's only one Pope in the whole of the world." "I'm the Emperor," she shrieked, "and I'm telling you, go back to that flounder and order him to make me Pope." "No, no, that's too much. Come on, I can't do that." "Nonsense, I order you to go to the flounder. Now go." The fisherman was frightened now. He felt sick. His knees were trembling. The wind was blowing wildly, tearing the leaves from the trees. Darkness was falling. When he got to the shore, the waves were roaring and crashing onto the rocks with explosions like cannon fire. Out at sea he could see ships firing distress rockets as they tossed and weltered in the waves. There was only one little bit of blue left in the sky, but it was surrounded by blood-red clouds and flashes of lightning. In despair the fisherman cried, "Flounder, flounder in the sea, listen up and come to me. My wife, the tender Isabel, has sent me here to do her will." "Well, what does she want?" said the flounder. "She wants to be Pope." "Go home, she's Pope already." When he got home, he found an immense church where the castle used to be. It was surrounded by palaces of every size and shape, but the church spire was the highest than any of them. A vast crowd of people surged around, trying to get in through the doors, but the crowd inside was even thicker, so the fisherman had to push, shove, struggle to get through. The church was illuminated by thousands and thousands of candles, and in every niche stood a box where a priest was busy hearing confessions. At the very centre was a vast golden throne, on which sat his wife, with 3 crowns on her head, one on top of the other, and scarlet slippers on her feet. A row of bishops waited in line to crawl along the floor and kiss her right slipper, and an equally long line of abbots waited to crawl along and kiss the left. On her right hand she had a ring as big as a cockerel, and on her left a ring as big as a goose. And a long line of cardinals waited to kiss the right ring, and a long line of archbishops to kiss the left. The fisherman called up, "Wife, are you Pope now?" "What does it look like?" "I've never seen a Pope, I don't know. Are you happy at last?" She sat completely still and said nothing. All the kisses being showered on her hands and feet sounded like a lot of sparrows pecking in the dirt. The fisherman thought she hadn't heard him, so he shouted again, "Wife, are you happy yet?" "I don't know. I'm not sure. I'll have to think about it." They both went to bed, and the fisherman slept very well because he'd had a busy day, but the wife tossed and turned, and she couldn't decide if she was satisfied or not, and she couldn't think what else to be after Pope, so she had a poor night of it. Finally the sun rose, and when she saw the sun, she sat up in bed at last. "I've got it. Husband, husband, wake up. Come on, wake up." She dug him in the ribs till he groaned and opened his eyes. "What is it? What do you want?" "Go back to the flounder at once. I want to be God." That made him sit up and say, "What?" "I want to be God. I want to cause the sun and the moon to rise. I can't bear it when I see them rising, and I haven't had anything to do with it, But if I was God, I could make it all happen. I could make them go backwards if I wanted. Go and tell the flounder I want to be God." He rubbed his eyes, he looked at her, but she looked so crazy that he was scared. So he got out of bed quickly. "Now," she screamed, "go!" "Oh, please," wife begged the poor man, falling to his knees. "Think again, my love, think again. The flounder made you emperor, the flounder made you pope, but he can't make you God. That's really impossible." She flew out of bed and hit him, her hair sticking out wildly from her head, her eyes rolling. She tore off her nightdress and screamed and stamped, shouting, "I can't bear to wait so long. You are driving me insane. Go and do as I tell you right now." The fisherman tugged on his trousers, hopping out of the bedroom, and ran to the seashore. There was such a storm raging that he could hardly stand against it. Rain lashed his face. Trees were being torn up from the ground. Houses were tumbled in every direction as great boulders came flying through the air, torn off the cliffs. The thunder crashed, the lightning flared. The waves on the sea as high as churches and castles and mountains, with sheets of foam flying in the crests. "Flounder, flounder in the sea, listen up and come to me. My wife, the modest Isabel, has sent me here to do a will." "Well, what does she want?" "Well, you see, she wants to be God." The flounder replied, "Go home. She's back in the piss-pot." And so she was, and there she is to this day. The end.